Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity podcast, where a veteran cold case homicide detective investigates the truth of the Christian worldview. J. Warner Wallace is a Dateline featured detective, Christian apologist, and best-selling author. This weekly show applies real investigative tools to the claims of Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity podcast. I am J. Warner Wallace. Okay, we're doing this week something we did, kind of a continuation of last week. I'm talking about the topics that I get asked about the most often now. Maybe it's because I'm an old guy. Maybe it's because so many people in our kind of sphere of Christian case-making, ministry in general, as we get a little bit older, we kind of start focusing on the things that matter in terms of character. And I think these are actually evidences for the Christian worldview. I'm talking to you today about a topic that I've written about, and again, in The Truth in True Crime. I'll just tell you, that's my favorite book. It's not even close. And although I know it probably is the least known book that I've written, everyone seems to know Cold Case Christianity or Person of Interest. Those two are very popular. But I think, look, in the end, at this age, I'm more concerned about making a case for discipleship. Here's what I mean. When I first got saved, look, I didn't know anything about the Bible, so I was investigating the Bible evidentially. And that's how I became a Christian. All the stuff that I've written about in God's Crime Scene, Cold Case Christianity, and Person of Interest. That's the stuff that I was focused in on for that first year before I could ever trust what the Bible was going to say about me. I needed to know if I could trust what it said about Jesus, right? About God. So that's where I spent my time. Now, of course, the first books I'm writing out of retirement as a detective were books that were talking about that initial journey. But by the time I wrote those books, I was already a Christian for some number of years. Like, that stuff was not like, okay, you want to know how I became a Christian? Here you go. But it's not the stuff that I'm struggling with or the stuff that I'm really interested in. You know, I got a master's degree in theology because I got saved, and I thought, okay, I'm so far behind the curve. And I had these weird, degree in fine art and a degree in architecture. And now I've been working all these years as a cop. And I'm thinking, okay, but what connections is this? I'm watching people around me who seem to know so much. And I thought, I'm just going to find the local seminary. And I did. Gateway Seminary. It used to be called Golden Gate Seminary of the Southern Baptist Convention. And that's where I attended. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try to catch up. I'd already passed through all the stuff I didn't get a degree in apologetics. I didn't really even care about apologetics. I didn't really start to get focused on apologetics until I became a youth pastor. So it was some time later. And I saw that my young people that I was leading were walking away from their faith. And I thought, maybe I should start sharing with them what brought me to faith. And the reason why I was sideways on that is because if you listen to my podcast, you may have heard this before, but I was such involved in the arts that I really wanted to bring the arts into this ministry I've been given as a youth pastor. I have my own kids in that ministry. And so the first year was very artistic, okay? To the point where I was really thinking about every aspect of the experience because I have a background in the arts. And not even realizing that none of this would have really a transformational impact. And it didn't. It really didn't. I mean, the young people who experienced all that, some of them went to Berkeley. And that's where they walked away from their faith. So we shifted everything. And we just started talking about the stuff that I went through. I never thought it would be even interesting to young people. Oh my gosh. They were fascinated by it, and it changed our ministry forever. And that's where I met Sean McDowell. Taking a trip to Berkeley with his students at that point. My youngest daughter was with him, just kind of visiting to see if she wanted to go to his school. So I'm training these students to go to Berkeley, and that's where he said, you should write a book about this. So the first books were really purely evidential books. Even though, to be honest, that was not where I was in my walk anymore. I went through that stuff when I first became a Christian. The stuff that I was wrestling with is the stuff that's in The Truth and True Crime. It's all those attributes of human nature that get exposed when we're in the worst possible moments. And you see this when you are working murders. You learn a lot about the nature of living, of life, from working deaths, all kinds of deaths, from suicides to naturals to all the stuff you get called out as a cop and all these murders. And so that book for me I'd been collecting data points for years. As a matter of fact, when I moved to Zondervan, I wanted to write the truth in true crime. And it was the year before COVID. And Zondervan said, yeah, okay. Yeah, but you're known for your apologetic stuff. We'd like to have a Jesus book. Well, the only thing I had left that I really hadn't talked about in depth was all the stuff that's in person of interest. And I knew that would take some time to unpack. And I knew it would be highly visual because it's fuse and fallout stuff. If you have that book, it's got 400 illustrations. I told my publisher, I said, hey, can you give me a year to build the stage presentations? Because I think I'm going to learn something from speaking about it publicly that'll help me write the book. And that's why that book has all of my illustrations in it. And that's about 400. And it took some time to write. But that was really just trying to convince Zondervan that I could do this other book, which they didn't have a space for. They were not sure what this is. Is this an apologetics book? Is this a self-help book? Is this a discipleship book? I think it's firmly within the category of apologetics. Here's, like I said last week, if Christianity is true, its foundational document, the New Testament, should describe us the way we really are. And there's a lot of explaining in the New Testament about our human nature. Is it accurate? Well, it turns out that all of the studies that have been done in the last 50 years or so in the social sciences, the idea of studying how we behave, it turns out that these things if you made a list of all the things that'll help you flourish as a human, that list would be absolutely biblical. And if you just simply read your Bible, you'd be doing those things already. You wouldn't have to wait for a study to demonstrate that this is helpful. So that book to me was fun to write. I got to tell 15 murder stories, true crime stories. And I got to show you how these reveal an aspect of our nature that if you take these steps, you can avoid the pitfalls for yourself. So let's talk about one of those. And I think it's one of the more shocking or surprising attributes of the 15 behaviors or changes in the way you think that would help you to flourish as a human. I think this is the one that's the most surprising for people, especially who are not, if they're not familiar. If I've got an audience where there's not all Christians, there's a lot of non-Christians in that audience, well, this is going to surprise them, I think. So let's just dive into this, all right? Now, I will tell you that I started to notice this more as a youth pastor, because at that time, social media was just, smartphones were not nearly as pervasive as they are today. And my students had them, but they were just at their infancy. And social media was there was no TikTok, for example. So a lot of the platforms, there was no Instagram when I first started. So a lot of these platforms were much more limited, but they were still already having an impact because students were starting to assess themselves based on whether or not they got the kind of reaction they were hoping for on their social media platforms. And they would talk about this all the time in small group. It became a thing, something we had to deal with. It's not a coincidence that the rates of depression and suicide in young people, you can see it do what it does historically, the line of either growth or decline. But then you get to the late, about 2012, 2013, 2014, and you see it begin to escalate out of control. Not surprisingly, at the same time, you have smartphones that are having the kind of impact that we saw as pastors. When I say pastors, I actually served as a volunteer because I already had a full-time job. So I did about 20 hours a week, which was crazy at the time, but I was working a 410, so I had an extra day I could give it, plus the weekends. And I had two paid interns. So they took that 40-hour pay they would give a pastor, and they split it in half and gave it to two interns. So we had a team of 3 that were pastoring this group together. So it was awesome. We had a small staff, and we were able to kind of really pay attention to what kids were saying. And we saw it all the time. And they've done studies on this. People want to be known. And we do kind of secretly crave celebrity. We crave, if you're a young person and you got a social media platform, okay, do you want it to be bigger or smaller? Of course you want it to be, and you're comparing it to your friends. How many likes did you get on a post? You're comparing it to your friends. This is the kind of stuff that's causing the rate of depression that we're seeing, is the comparative nature And it's about popularity. And of course, the more popular you are, the more you kind of become like a local legend. And I tell a story in The Truth and True Crime about a gangster who was a local legend and where that leads. But we know what the studies show. The studies show it all the time. I cite a study from USA Today. It's called Young People Who Use Social Media Seek Fame. That's right. The more, it turns out, the study shows that the more you are on social media, the more likely you are to desire celebrity. It's available to us. And we're in a generation now where the idea of being popular, being known. Would you have imagined, if you're old like me, go back 10, 15 years, the idea of an influencer? What would that even mean 20 years ago? We know what it means now. It just means internet celebrity in many ways, because it takes celebrity, being known to a certain level, before you can influence somebody. So I also cite another study, which is a study from the Pew Research Center on how young people view their lives. This is just studying Gen Z. Well, what are their top goals? Are you surprised if I told you the top goals, according to this Pew Research Center, and I've got all the citations for these in the book, are fortune and fame? Well, of course they are. And this is not like it's just for Gen Z, millennials. The Independent published this study. I thought this was fascinating on millennials. The story came out titled, "Millennials Will Go to Extreme Lengths for Celebrity Fame, Including Disowning Their Family," finds social media report. That's right. This study showed that 1 in 4 would quit their jobs. 1 in 4 millennials would quit their jobs if they could be famous. 1 in 6 would forego having kids. 1 in 10 would forego a degree. And 1 in 12 would disown their family. The power of celebrity. And look, we all see it. I'll give you an example of this. When I try to do a podcast, I try to make sure it's evergreen. So I don't want to usually focus on things that are happening right away. Of course, this might change, but I think the social media phenomenon I'm talking about will be here for decades. I think this is a genie you can't put back in the bottle. So I think this will be an evergreen kind of topic for us to think about. But I'll tell you, I think that as I watch the tragedies in the last year, tragedies surrounding mass shootings, tragedies surrounding crimes, deployments of federal forces that people object to in cities, political stuff, who got elected, what did that person say, the Charlie Kirk assassination. Okay, all of these things are things that people naturally want to talk about. But remember, every one of these things also provides an opportunity for whoever's talking to grow their celebrity. And I've always felt like, okay, if that's what this is about, let's just get back to the gospel. Let's get back to the basics. Yes, I want to address social issues in culture, no doubt about it. But if you actually trusted your Bible and read it like a detective, you wouldn't be fooled by this other stuff anyway, because you'd be grounding your thoughts right back in the Word of God, and you'd be picking it apart word by word because you're geeked out and obsessed with it, and then you'd end up protecting yourself from all kinds of stupid things. My concern is that every time I hear somebody online who's talking about the latest conspiracy theory or the latest whatever it may be, is it because they really believe it? Or they know that episode is likely to get attention, that approach is likely to get your social media to grow. We are so concerned innately about celebrity that I think we actually use it. And by the way, we'll spiritualize it. Oh, this is a chance to talk about the gospel. Then just talk about the gospel. But if I can grow my platform, I can talk about the gospel more. Okay, there's the danger. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I think one of the bigger problems we have right now in culture is that, unlike when I was growing up, I don't know. Look, whenever I talk this way, my wife always says, "You sound like that old man who says, 'Get off my lawn.'" You can't always be saying, "When I was a kid, I walked, uphill both ways in the snow to school." No, that wasn't the case. But I do think that things have changed from technology. If you were let's say you were just 1990, that's not that long ago. In 1990, you wanted to be famous in America on media, like media famous? You'd have to go through one of the 3 legacy networks at the time, right? You didn't have a lot of options in 1990 to go through. ABC, CBS, NBC, those are the big ones. There were no streaming platforms, no streaming services, and each one of those legacy networks had its share of executives and producers who got to pick who's going to be on what show and when that show is going to run, and these were the gatekeepers. Not anyone could just pop along and say, I'm going to do this and become viral. There were gatekeepers that limited the number of people who even got an opportunity. And of course, now those gatekeepers are gone because the shows that I'm seeing on legacy networks are far smaller in terms of viewership than the shows that we're seeing on YouTube. And there's no gatekeeper on YouTube. You got an idea? You got a camera? Is the idea outrageous enough? Are you provocative enough? You can grow a huge audience. How professional does it need to look? Just so-so. I mean, if you got 2 cameras, it'd be better. But you don't need to get past an executive or past a network gatekeeper. There are none. Do you see what this would do? It opened the door to anyone and everyone. And this is why we have now, by the way, if everyone's a celebrity, nobody's a celebrity. So the more people we have that are on the platform as multimedia influencers, they're important. It means that none of them are, because there's tons of these now. The whole thing that made celebrity special was the rareness of it. But if it's no longer rare, and this is why when someone says, well, do you want to do a show on this streaming platform? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, if it's not going to advance the gospel, no. Who's going to watch anything anymore? Everything has been, if you said, 30 years ago, would you like to have a show on ABC at 8 p.m. on Wednesday? You'd be a fool to say no. But now if they say, would you like to have a show on this streaming platform? Maybe. Who's going to watch that? I mean, especially if you're one of the 50 crime shows on one of these crime streaming services. I mean, you're just buried in the mix of how are you even going to stand out in that setting? So the point is, when you take away the gatekeepers, don't be surprised that now everyone not only craves celebrity, but feels as though it's accessible. It's possible for them. It's possible for anyone. So what is it that's, I think, at the root? I always want to know, what is at the root that's driving this kind of a desire for celebrity? And I think that one of the things that's driving it is something that philosopher Alain de Botton said that I think is spot on. He says, why do we seek celebrity? Well, our desire for celebrity is driven by, quote, the intimate desire to be liked and treated with justice and kindness by people we don't even know. I think there's some truth in that. That it's this desire to be wanted, to be loved, to be in a position where people venerate you in some way. It's really kind of the stuff you used to get from friendships, right? But you want to be known by people, and by the more people, the better. Now, what he does say, I think was really accurate, as he continues in his study, he says, quote, no one would want to be famous who hadn't also, somewhere in the past, been made to feel extremely insignificant. And so I think if we were to look deeply in some of the stories, you know how they always say, don't Google your heroes? So Susie and I will watch different shows, see things online about celebrities who are famous, who maybe just passed away, or maybe they are getting older, or whatever it may be. Well, you kind of want to go online and see, boy, it's a nice guy. Then you go online and you find out, actually, this is his 4th marriage and he's mistreated 3 of the others. And it's like, oh my gosh, you don't even want to know, right? But it turns out at some point in his childhood also, you often will see that this childhood was kind of sideways. I don't think it's too far afield for Alain de Botton to say that this is probably true, that people who want this fame, the more you want it, it's probably because you felt at some point in the past that you didn't matter at all. And this is the way you can matter. People want to matter to other people. It's as simple as that. So I think that's one of the driving things. All the research that I read on this for this chapter also points to something else that I think is fascinating. They call it, quote, symbolic immortality, unquote. The idea here is that you can transcend the limits of your lifetime, your mortal existence, if you can simply become part of the cultural conversation, become part of the language As a matter of fact, there's a study out that talks about Marilyn Monroe in this regard. And here's what this study says. Marilyn Monroe may have died on August 5th, 1962, but her image is still very much alive today because the celebrities have, quote, entered the language of the culture, unquote. They have the opportunity to create something that will outlive them. Most people, if you're listening to this podcast, probably know something about Marilyn Monroe. Do you know anything about her really, though? No, but you have a character that's been created for you that is in your mind that even though she's been dead for nearly, 60 years, she still, the name still exists. She's kind of outlived her life. She's not really, of course, immortal, but her name is. The image of her is, at least. And I think there's some truth in both of these. Now, here's the sad reality, though. It appears to me that neither of these desires we have, desires to really matter in the eyes of others, desire to really live beyond the limits of our own, you don't get these. Fame doesn't do this for you. You have this desire to matter with others, this desire for friendship, deep friendships that people actually care about you. Well, this doesn't happen in social media. It's an illusion. There's an illusion that you actually are known. Like people will listen to my podcast and they'll say, I feel like I know you. Do they really know much about me? I could reveal a lot about myself and try to be as transparent as possible. But you know who really knows me is Susie. And everybody else knows a version of me that I have carefully crafted for public consumption. So if you want to matter, do you want to matter or do you want the illusion to matter? We have to make that decision because it turns out this desire for friendship, friends are the people that get to know you so deeply and you give them permission to speak the truth to you. Real friends, true friends, that's a whole other chapter of truth and true crime, are the kind of people that you allow to deep dive, that you allow to say the things to you that only a friend can get away with, that help you become the best version of you can possibly be. That's what you're looking for when it comes to friends. And you're not going to get that with strangers who think they know your persona. And by the way, this is also the problem with celebrity in terms of living forever or the symbolic immortality piece. Yeah, it turns out that what we know about Marilyn Monroe, the persona that she crafted for us. And that persona is not true. That's why you don't want to do any research on your heroes. You'll find out you'll be disappointed. You have imagined something because that's what was carefully crafted. And by the way, while you're alive, you have to keep on protecting yourself, protecting the truth, because you don't want people to know that version of you. So what happens is all these folks who are seeking this public persona, they are stuck in their persona. This is even true in simple ways for people like us, like me, who writes books. This is why it's so hard if they know you as the detective who does case-making books with evidence, they can't see you any other way. You're stuck in a persona. And it turns out that that's the thing that, that's the guy who wrote, was the Dateline detective who wrote, that's just a small piece of who I am. And that's the only piece that lives. And while you're alive, if you want that, even that piece to live, you have to constantly protect your persona. There's tons of stories out there of people who ended up miserable because they spent their life trying. Just put it this way. Fame does not satisfy your desire for friendship, and fame does not satisfy your desire for forever. And if you need some poster children for this kind of thing, well, there are a couple. Anthony Bourdain, you remember him from Parts Unknown? This was a series that was on CNN. What a great concept. I'm just going to go to all these extravagant places. Can you imagine living this life, getting to travel, the best food, all these amazing, crazy experiences he had? And, it was on for at least, I don't know how many years it was on. I think it was nominated for several Emmys. I don't know if he ever won any, but he was pretty famous. When you talk about Anthony Bourdain even now, and people will say, oh, yeah, I watched that show. That was a great show. So he's got the fame thing going. Let me tell you what he wrote to his mom in a text. He said, I hate my fans too. I hate being famous. I hate my job. As a matter of fact, I am lonely and living in constant uncertainty. And then eventually he committed suicide. He was born in 1956. He died in 2018. He was 61 years old. And fame apparently did not deliver what he thought it was going to deliver. It just didn't. If you don't remember Anthony Bourdain, do you remember Matthew Perry? From Friends? I mean, this is about as big a celebrity as you can get from a sitcom ensemble. I can't imagine any sitcom being quite bigger than Friends. And he made a name for himself. And by the way, I think he had a couple of really good sitcoms afterwards too, comedies afterwards. They were kind of pseudo comedies. I actually liked his work. His dad, his stepfather, is Keith Morrison, who did all the interviews with me on Dateline. Now, Matthew, he wrote a book. He went through all kinds of substance abuse issues. And in his book, here's what he said. He said, nobody wanted to be famous more than me. I was convinced it was the answer. He said there was steam coming out of my ears. I wanted to be famous so badly. You want the attention. You want the bucks. You want the best seat in the restaurant. I didn't think what the repercussions would be. I was 25. It was the second year of Friends, and 8 months into it, I realized the American dream is not making me happy, not filling the holes in my life. I couldn't get enough attention. Ultimately, he writes in that book, fame does not do what you think it's going to do. It was all a trick. And he overdosed. Also, 54. You'll see, I don't have to go too far for you to see, but these are striking because these speak specifically about the disappointment of an expectation that fame, what they thought would deliver. And it didn't. Now, I want to take a second here to talk about why there's a danger, even for us in the church, certainly in the Christian apologetic sphere, for all of us, anyone who's listening to this. It turns out that fame is one of the, there's a truth about fame and celebrity that is something we've got to talk about because it's connected to the motives that cause us to do stupid things. As a matter of fact, if you had an award ceremony for stupid, and you had a podium in which people would stand to win the gold or the bronze or the silver for stupid behavior, well, first of all, the podium itself would be built on this thing we all know as pride. Because it turns out it's our pride that drives us to do all the stupid things, okay? But there are some levels of stupid, I think. And by the way, this is the stuff I always say. This is the 3 reasons why anyone commits a murder. It's the 3 reasons why anyone does any sin. It's the 3 reasons why anyone has ever misbehaved. There is no 4th reason. I get it. People will write to me. They'll say, there's a 4th reason. We'll get to those in a second. They're not. They're always going to stand on this podium called pride, and they're always going to express themselves through these 3 issues. I would say the bronze in stupid is financial greed. People are driven to do things for money. I mean, when I say there's a difference, it's kind of like in a race, like a 100-yard dash. The difference between the gold medalist and the bronze and the silver medalist is like a nanosecond, right? It's so small. It's like just such a small that's probably true here too. But financial greed, I'll put in the bronze. The silver, I'll just say, is sexual lust, relationships. And there's some danger in that too, right? But we'll get to that. The gold medal, in my view, is a huge overarching desire and pursuit that encompasses about 70%, I think, of all the stupid things you will ever do in your life, and it's the pursuit of power. So, financial greed is when you do something because it's financially profitable to you, and this is why, as ministers, as people who serve in this church community, I sell books. But you better be able to, I do believe we have to take the money out. So I definitely get profit from books. And so I feel like a burden to provide as much free material in other categories and spend my time in those areas where I'm serving or creating content that does not financially benefit me. Because in the end, I feel like, hey, this is what we're called to do as Christians. We're going to do a whole episode on how tent making and how really anyone who's listening to this can contribute to what we're doing, to what the whole mission of case making in Christianity is all about, because you have to take the money out of it. But financial greed is big. Relationships are big. But this pursuit of power is a lot of other categories. Like when you see someone come in and kill 30 people of a different religion, or kill people of a different sex, or a different worldview, whatever it may be, different race. What are they doing? They're saying, I am more important than you. This is an expression of raw power. So you're going to see this now. So there's your middle round, okay? It's lust, greed, power. Don't tell me, don't write to me or comment in the comment section and say, oh, what about vengeance? You're forgetting this. Okay, a couple things. What are you vengeful about? It's one of these three things. So what are you jealous about? It's one of these three things. What about just flat crazy? I'm talking about the kind of motive that is triable in a jury trial. If you are criminally insane, which, by the way, everyone wants to say they are, but that's not true. Sane people do crazy things. But if you're criminally, if the court does agree, yeah, he's criminally insane, well, then we're not going to try you. If we can try you, this is going to be one of your three motives. And everything comes back to these. Why am I even talking about this? Because where do you think celebrity falls? The desire for celebrity. It falls in the gold medal round. It's the power thing. It's that you want, just exactly like Matthew Perry said, this is what celebrity brings, right? You want it. You want to be famous. You want the attention. You want the bucks. You want the best seat in the restaurant. What is he talking about here? Sex, money, and power. Celebrity can get you these things. Now I'm going to tell you, that's the danger of them. Here's what I know from all my casework and from watching the culture. These are three itches. If you scratch one of these itches, you will scratch the other two eventually. And that's why you have to protect yourself from all of them. If you know this is the three reasons why you're going to stumble, and you're, like, say, starting a church, well, now you know how to protect yourself, don't you? So let me show you what I mean by that. So if you are you're a pastor in a church, and it's a medium-sized church, and you've got an elder board, and they're trying to protect you from the ways you could stumble, they're going to say a couple of things. Number one, you're going to have a fixed income that we're going to approve as a board. It's going to be within the median range of our community. You know, we're going to make sure that you're not out there trying to side hustle, that we're going to pay you enough to kind of keep you to be modest, but you're not going to starve, but you're also, we don't want you like getting fixed on what you're going to earn. So we're going to find that medium range. Great. We're also going to put some safeguards around you, because we don't want you to be exposed to any opportunities maybe to cheat on your spouse. So we're going to make sure maybe put a Billy Graham rule or a Mike Pence rule, right? That's that idea that you don't do anything alone with a member of the opposite sex. Whatever your rule structure is, why are they even saying this? They're trying to protect the pastor from the things that can cause the pastor to fall. Even the appearance of impropriety, they're just trying to protect the pastor. Oh, but when it gets to celebrity, now that's different. We want our pastor to be a celebrity. We want our pastor because we want to reach people with the gospel. And the more famous, you want to do a podcast? Great, we'll pay for it. Oh, you want to get out there and do this public thing? Great. We want social media? Yeah, we'll handle that. We'll hire somebody to do your social media. We want you to be famous because we think that your fame is going to grow a church or grow opportunities to do something good, and it will. But here's my point, though. The minute you start to scratch that itch, if you don't protect the pastor from celebrity, you don't think that people who get famous aren't approached? Yeah, of course they are. They did a study on celebrity, and I quote it in The Truth and True Crime. It's a very long study they did, and talking to lots of celebrities who didn't want to go public with their statements, but they just assessed this. So here's what they talked to one male celebrity, and here's what he said. He said, I live in Hollywood, and I'm a middle-aged man, and Miss September keeps throwing herself at me. That wouldn't happen if I wasn't famous. Believe me, the average guy turning down Miss September is a tough day. That would show intestinal fortitude that I don't know that I have. What did they conclude? They said, the lure, and this is their quote, the lure of life's temptations may be the most secret side of celebrity experience. What they say is the perks of fame are an unexpected side benefit and also a danger. That's right. If you scratch that one itch, fame, the other opportunities are going to come. Number one, you're going to command more money. And you're also going to have opportunities just without even trying. I know this is true because I've seen it over and over again in criminal cases, but you know it's true because you've seen it over and over again in public cases. Just situations with pastors who have fallen, and with also like with apologists. Okay, I'm going to make this statement and I'm going to try to make it as plainly as I can. I'm just somebody who watches people, and I know my own. Maybe I'm exporting onto others my own sinful nature because I know that I'm just as likely to fall in these three areas as anybody else. No one is superhuman. So when I see someone out there who's publicly taking a step in one of these three categories, I'm like, yeah. And I remember one time seeing this and speaking to somebody, a friend of mine, who's in the same space as I am, speaking publicly in churches, and saying, this guy's, the adoration and his acceptance of this adoration worries me. And I remember my friend said, you're being an idiot. Knock it off. You're always so suspicious of people. Within a year, a big sex scandal was exposed. I didn't even see that coming. I was shocked as anybody else. I saw simply the issue of celebrity. But again, if you scratch that one itch, other opportunities are going to come. So here's my advice to you. If you're listening, protect yourself in those three areas. Like, remember this whole idea. And by the way, you think, well, I'm not a celebrity. Don't have to worry about that. You have a social media platform. And a lot of people who listen to my podcast are people who are so geeked out in apologetics like I am that they would like to step into this genre. Like they'd like to do something in their local church, do something. Look, even fame within your local church, being well known, I've seen this that also gets leveraged for the other fallen things. So just be aware of it. Now, I'm not going to kind of cite the problem without giving you a solution, because there is this one surprising attribute that most people in the secular world can't get. If I said to you, hey, what's the one thing you could adopt, the one thing you could embrace, the one behavior or attitude that you could embrace that, number one, will make you more creative, you'll be better able to discern things that are out there in the culture. You'll actually get better grades. If you're taking the SAT, your SAT scores will go up. You'll become a better learner. You're going to have better mental health. And as a result of that, the somatic relationships to physical health will also be better. You'll have less stress. You're going to be a better leader if you're leading somebody, a better employee if you're being led by somebody. Your relationships, they're going to get deeper. They're going to be far better on a number of measurable areas. You will also end up serving and becoming more helpful in your local community and more helpful in your marriage. You'll become more generous. You'll even become more kind and more tolerant of other people. By the way, I collected all the studies to demonstrate that these things improve, and it's not what's going to make them improve. It's not celebrity. It's humility. Just the opposite. It's humility. Humility changes everything, and the secular studies demonstrate this. All of those areas improve if you can adopt humility. And what is humility? Well, it's not quite what C.S. Lewis likes to describe it as. Because he said when he was alive, he said, humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. So he's basically saying humility is not like thinking of yourself less highly, it's thinking of yourself less often. But the biblical description of humility, it doesn't quite match that. Here's what Paul says. He says, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. So here Paul is clearly saying that humility doesn't mean thinking of yourself less often. It also means thinking of yourself less highly, because you're going to see others as more significant than yourself. And you know this is true. If you're not a Christian, you would still agree with me on this, because we just naturally reject prideful people. And the studies show this. Prideful people are more likely to be fixated on celebrity. They are difficult to teach because they think they know everything. They are more clearly obstinate and rigid and willful and stuck in their way because they think their way is better than anybody else's, and they always judge others. They are far more judgmental. And they don't share much because they feel like they don't need to. Why would I share things with people who aren't even as important as I am? They're usually stingier. They are, of course, more conceited and self-focused, and they are really hard to lead. And as leaders, they are tyrants. But if you flip that script, if somebody's like that in your life and you had like an injection, like you had a dose, you created a pill that you could give them and slip it into their food so they would instantly become humble, well, every one of those statistics flips when people become humble. And they no longer care about celebrity, and they become teachable, and they aren't stubborn, and they're willing to explore alternatives, and they don't judge others. They don't hoard things for themselves. They learn to elevate others. They're not self-serving. They actually follow direction because they don't think of themselves so highly that they won't listen to anybody else. And now I collected all those studies, and I think I mentioned last week that the footnotes for the Truth and True Crime are actually like, I think twice or three times as long as the actual text for the book, and so we had to kick them out as a PDF. But all those studies, I've cited where they came from, and I've given you summaries of what the studies actually show. But you don't need those, because if you've got a Bible, it's all in there. It's all in the Bible, because the Bible describes the world the way it really is, and it describes us the way we really are. So in 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, when it says that for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. What it's basically saying is that for all that is in the world, sexual lust and financial greed and power, that is not from the Father, but is from the world. Now, there's a sense in when Paul said, when John says this, what he means is the abuse of those things, the unbalanced pursuit of those things, because it turns out that sex, power, and money are actually good things that you could use as a blessing. They are things that God has given us that we could actually leverage for something good. It's just when we become selfish about these things, when we're no longer humble about these things, well, then we end up exploiting them. And they become motives then for bad behavior because it's all about us. That's why humility flips the script. Now, how do you become humble? Well, this is the biggest problem because I don't think you can pursue it. I used to speak a lot with Mike Adams, who's no longer with us. And Mike was just a hilarious guy, a very talented guy, a guitar player, just a really sweet man, and much more sensitive, I think, than people actually thought or actually recognized. He was tough. He would say funny things. He would call out when he saw something that he thought was silly. He would tell you that's silly, and he would just call it out. But that kind of bravado really did not, I think, accurately depict who he really was. I mean, he was a man who had very deep, sensitive feelings, and he cared what people thought about him. But he was so funny. And he would always, I don't know how many times he told me this joke or one just like it. He would say, hey, I'm writing a new book, Jim, How to Become Humble in 10 Easy Steps, and how I made it in 8, which is pretty humble because I actually made it in 6. He would say that kind of thing, and we'd all laugh about it. But I think he captures something that we know is actually true. If you think deeply about the nature of humility, you can't pursue it. Because the more you pursue it, the more you pridefully think you've captured it. If I told you, I am the most humble person you'll ever meet, you automatically go, yeah, that's not true. Because a humble person would never say that. And so this idea of pursuing humility, I think, is a trap. Because it often will lead us, kind of like Mike, how to do it in 10 easy steps and how I did it in 8. And so I think that really we have to kind of ask ourselves, well, what's... I think it's what Spurgeon said. I think that humility is not pursued, it's realized. It's when you have a proper assessment of who you are. Now, how do you get the proper assessment? I think we often, everything's comparative. Think about it. When you walk in, if you're in a group of people and you said, oh, I'm rich, what did that even mean? What you really mean is I'm richer than you. Or I'm handsome, or I'm smart, or whatever it may be. You're comparing yourself to others. And you're saying, compared horizontally to these knuckleheads in this room, I'm actually something pretty special. Well, it's because you're comparing yourself in the wrong direction. It's not a proper assessment of who you are. Spurgeon says it's a proper assessment of who you are before a holy God. That vertical assessment is what changes all of it. And so if you're going to start to think about how we could grapple, that's what I tried to do in The Truth and True Crime, not just to give you the problem, tell you a crime story that illustrates it. I want, what can we do? So I usually give several steps you could take. Again, not in pursuit of something, just how can I realize? How can I make a proper assessment of who I am before a holy God? Well, ask yourself this. Is that how you're comparing yourself? Do you know who you really are compared to perfection? Or are you comparing yourself horizontally to people who are less perfect than you? Because it always makes us feel better. So the first thing you have to do is actually know who you are. And this is why if you're not, you can hear the story of Jesus. You can hear my case for Jesus, evidentially. But if you don't think you're a sinner, then you have no need for a Savior. It's only people who know they are sinners in need of a Savior who ever bend their knee and become Christians, right? So there's the biggest issue, I think, that we have to look at is, do we know that the first step into the Christian worldview is a step of humility. You've got to bend your knee and make a proper assessment that you are a mess. When you read that passage in Romans that talks about how no one pursues God, that everyone is a sinner in need of a Savior, does it resonate with you? Do you go, yeah, that's describing me personally? I remember when I first got interested in Christianity, I spent a long time trying to discover or determine if the Gospels were reliable as eyewitness accounts. But it wasn't until I did all that, and I was like, okay, I'm trusting the Gospels are accurate, but still had no idea what the Gospel was, that I'm reading Paul, and I'm reading his letters and going, oh my gosh, he's describing me perfectly. I think that process helped me to become more acutely aware of my own shortcoming. So first of all, do you know yourself? Ask yourself that question. Are you properly estimating yourself? 2, are you the kind of person who celebrates others? Just to make that assessment. Because if you're not, it's probably a problem. Why aren't you celebrating others? Because you're concerned that you would be less valuable in some way if others are more valuable or better at something. What does that say about you? Are you comfortable enough with who you are that you can celebrate others? Are you lifting up others, or are you just lifting yourself up? 3, are you grateful? Are you a grateful person? I complain about everything. So I know this is, by the way, I said this last week, I'll just say it again. In this generation, and I'm in my 60s now, I'm only writing about the things that I'm struggling with. I feel blessed. I don't have to pay my bills with books, so I can write about whatever I want. If a publisher says, yeah, that might not sell a bunch, but we'll do it if you like it. Sure, it fits within our catalog. They'll let me write a book, and I get to write a book about the things that I'm interested in, not the stuff that's going on around me. I'm just like, this is the struggle, and I think if I'm struggling with this, you might be too. So for me, I know I'm not a grateful person, and that ingratitude is pride. That means I think I deserve more, really. The way I was raised, the fact that I have anything at all, even if it's modest, we had nothing growing up. I should be the most grateful person on planet Earth. But I still struggle with gratitude. It's a pride issue. It's a pride issue. It's a lack of humility. Last thing. Do you look up? Or are you constantly looking around? Are you more in awe of yourself and your circumstance than you are with God? Because I know we get it. We're Christians. We're supposed to be more in awe with God, but we often are not looking up. We're looking around. So our comparisons need to be not with others who are in our environment. They need to be with a holy God who is perfect, and we need to have our eyes on him because it'll keep us humble. You know, Isaiah was a different kind of guy, and then he gets in the presence of God. Things change. So I just want to say that these are the 2 things that cause us to seek celebrity are friendship and forever. So keep that in mind. And by the way, the Christian worldview explains this. Why? Okay. Why do you crave friendship? Why do you crave this idea that you matter, that you're known in some way? We talked about identity last week. Why does this matter so much? Because you were created in the image of a triune God. In other words, the theology matters, and what we think about God matters. If God is not triune in nature, then he might love what he creates, but he would never have that experience of loving his creation, of loving anything, until he creates something he could love. So Allah does not, he could not say that he is love by nature, but our God, we know from 1 John, is love by nature. That is his, why? Because he's triune in nature, the lover, the beloved, and the spirit of love between them. This is a God who is all about this kind of community, all about this kind of eternal relationship. We crave that kind of satisfying relationship because we were created in the image of a God who is by his very nature in relationship. Why do you crave friendship? Because you're in the image of the Trinity. Actually explains why you're craving this. Why do you want forever? Because you were created in the image of a God who is eternal. You seek the thing that you know, you innately know that someday you probably will possess, right? Like we have this sense that if we have souls and minds, would they die when our bodies and brains die? But they would probably know that. Why would they? So what happens beyond the grave? It's not like you have to be a Christian to have thought about that. You want to live forever, though, because you were created in the image of an eternal God. It turns out the triune nature of God, the eternal nature of God, are why we seek these things to begin with. And you see this on all the pages of Scripture, that the nature of God, we grasp at it, and we often replace what we really want from God in the stupid things that are in our environment. But you'll see example after example, though, of people who mastered humility and flipped the script. Joseph, right? Sold up by his brothers. Eventually those brothers are going to come back to him. They need something now. And now he's in a position to be vindictive, to lord over them. He's actually a celebrity of sorts. He's commanding a lot of power. And what does he do? He doesn't command over them. He displays humility. Then you'll see Isaiah in the throne room of God. What happens? He immediately falls to his knees. When you start comparing yourself not horizontally, but you start comparing yourself vertically, you start to actually have a different focus, a different sense, a different perception of yourself. Because you might be better. You might be able to find someone in your environment you're smarter than, more attractive than, bigger, stronger than, richer than, whatever it may be. But you will never compare well if you're looking vertically. And finally, who personifies humility more than anyone? Of course, it's Jesus. And this is why in Philippians 2, Paul will say, you need to have that attitude of Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of God, did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant and being made in the image of man. He humbled himself, Paul said, to the point of death, even death on a cross. That's the attitude. By the way, that's a creedal statement. We often will say, well, there's a great creedal statement that describes the nature of Jesus. That's not even why Paul said it. Paul used all of that all those descriptors to basically say to us, why don't you have, if he can be humble, why can't you? He wrote that not for the purpose of describing Jesus, but for the purpose of describing humility. And this is why you'll see that even Peter, in 1 Peter 5, verse 5, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so at the proper time he may exalt you. All these writers in the Scriptures, in the letters, Paul, John, Peter, they're simply echoing the words of Jesus. In Matthew 23:8, the greatest among you shall be your servant. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So I can tell you that in all of my casework, I see it over and over again, that the celebrity is what gets you in trouble. The pursuit of power to be known, it very, very seldom does it ever end well. And that's something that's ancient. So this is, and by the way, if you look to a Christian worldview, you're going to discover a couple of things that are going to help you with your pursuit of celebrity. Number one, you're going to discover that no one loves you like God loves you, period. Number two, you're going to discover that only God can provide eternal life. And this is, if you read through John's gospel, you'll see how many times Jesus talks about eternal life. And finally, it turns out that if you want that acceptance, if you want the love of God, if you want the immortality that God offers, that all starts with an act of humility. Now, let me just finish by explaining why that's so important. I think this issue, that humility happens to be strangely the one attribute that if you embraced it, it would change everything about what how you flourish. It would increase every metric. That's a weird thing, right? Well, it turns out only one worldview actually is grounded in humility. Why do I say that? Well, all secular and atheist worldviews are doing worldviews. They're transactional. In other words, if I do these 5 things, I get a degree. Okay. If I do these things, I get the girl. If I do these things, I get the job. If I do these things, I get promoted. If I do, there's a course, there's a path. We talk about it all the way. What's the success gate? What's the sequence of success? The success sequence. What do I have to do in what order to get the best outcome? That's the secular world talking to you. It's a doing worldview. And by the way, all doing worldviews simply amplify pride. Why? Because how do you know you're doing well? It's compared to everybody else. So if you promote that guy over me and he's done nothing to deserve that promotion, I'm going to be upset. Why? Because it's a doing worldview. This is why you see, and how many times have you felt that way? You've done something you thought that should get you the best grade, should get you the promotion, should get the job, and you're upset when you don't get it because you feel like this is unfair. Why? Because this is a transactional worldview. I did my job. I did my half of it. Why aren't you doing yours? That's your question. But it turns out not just secularism or atheism is a doing worldview. The theistic worldviews largely are doing worldviews also. If you're Jewish, you have to do the 10 Commandments. That's how you get the best that the worldview offers. Do the 10 Commandments. You got to do. Muslims got to do the 5 pillars of faith. Buddhists, you got to do the 4 noble truths or the Eightfold Path. If you're Baha'i, there's a law, the Baha'i law. You have to do that. If you're Hindu, you got to do the good deeds or the karma yoga. And if you're a Mormon, and I realize that everyone wants to change, Mormons, Latter-day Saints constantly are trying to change the way that they discuss, but traditional Mormonism, it taught that you have to do the 10 Commandments, and it's after all you can do that you are saved. It's a doing worldview. And if you want to amplify humility, you're going to have to take the doing out of the worldview, because all doing does is it leverages pride. In other words, if I knew that the thing that would cause humans to flourish is humility, so I'm going to create a worldview that will amplify and require humility and then advance those who embrace humility, well, I'd have to create a done worldview, not a doing worldview. And that is the Christian worldview. In Ephesians 2, Paul says in verse 8, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing." There it is. It's the gift of God, not a result of works. Why? So you'll shut up and stop boasting. It's a pride solver. Now, could it be that of all the worldviews that could advance the cause of human flourishing by this weird thing that no one really ever thinks about called humility, the one that happens to be grounded in humility, the only one, because it's the only done worldview, happens to be Christianity? It could be a coincidence. Or it could be this is yet another evidence that Christianity is from the mind of your Creator, because He knows what will help you. He created you. He knows how you will flourish. So this is the worldview in which you could actually flourish, because this begins with an act of humility, and then it cultivates, it grows humility on every page of the New Testament. So this is why I think this overarching case for human flourishing is so powerful And it's a powerful apologetic. Let's just finish there. Remember, when I started writing, I would write about why we know Christianity is true. But this is a generation in which we're living, which I think young people want to know, not only is it true, is it good? Is it beautiful? Or is it the cause of every bad thing that's going on in our culture, just the way the media like to portray it? Is Christianity still good? Well, it turns out if you would simply embrace what it teaches, you'd have the best life. Because every metric that we measure for human flourishing from a secular angle simply reiterates the claims of the New Testament. So in the end, even if you didn't think you don't want to be a Christian, you'd be wise to live as though it's true, because you would flourish at a much higher level. So I hope that kind of helps you to think through a second kind of hidden attribute that I think changes everything. And it is the issue of human flourishing. Yeah, if you'd like to know more about this, I will tell you that's my favorite book, The Truth in True Crime. It's also got we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort doing 15, 16 episodes of a study. It's really pretty cool, and it's on Right Now Media, and you can also purchase the study online. But if you want to do it with your small group, great, do it. But look, in the end, I always say, exhaust everything that an author has that he'll give you for free before you spend a dime. So we've written about all of these topics on our website, coldcasechristianity.com. And if you want to go further, of course you have to, books, that's what books do. They take you a step further. But we want to try to give you as much as we can so you can flourish even if you don't happen to buy a certain resource. Our resources at coldcasechristianity.com are all free, and they're all downloadable. I hope you enjoy them. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We'll see you right back here next week at Cold Case Christianity Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Cold Case Christianity Podcast with Cold Case detective and Christian apologist, J. Warner Wallace. To explore more resources, books, and free training materials, visit coldcasechristianity.com and keep learning to make the case for the truth of Christianity.